They really thought they were pulling off precision work, didn't they? Mapping out strategies, whispering names, drawing little circles around you like hunters studying a creature they believed they understood. But the funniest part, the darkest comedy of all, is how they miscalculated the basics. They dug a grave, drew the blueprint, marked the spot, and then stepped right into it like tourists following a broken map. Not because you outplayed them loudly, not because you exerted any force, but because they never bothered to confirm who the grave was actually for. That one missing checkpoint, that one skipped verification, that one incorrect coordinate, that's the fracture that swallowed them whole. And people are finally seeing it, aren't they? The numbers, the patterns, the sudden shift in behavior. Everyone is running calculations now, whispering to themselves, how did this flip so badly? How did the target become the one holding the advantage? Because that's what happens when arrogance becomes navigation. They followed their own confidence like a GPS that hadn't been updated in years, marching proudly into a pit they dug for someone whose survival instinct is sharper than their entire collective mindset. They never questioned it because they were too intoxicated by the fantasy of your downfall. They couldn't resist the temptation to imagine you buried, forgotten, erased. That temptation became their compass, and compasses built on ego never point north. You, on the other hand, watched the entire operation unfold with the kind of calm that unsettles environments. You didn't intervene. You didn't argue. You didn't warn them. You simply observed the excavation, their tools, their haste, their blind spots. They thought they were constructing an ending. They didn't realize they were constructing evidence. And you let them, because what's more poetic than watching someone dig their own undoing while humming victory tunes under their breath? People underestimate how dangerous misinterpretation can be. Not in the dramatic sense, but in the subtle everyday misreadings that snowball into catastrophe. They misread you, misread your patience, misread your restraint, misread your quiet forward movement as vulnerability. They designed the grave for the version of you they invented in their heads, not the version standing right in front of them. That version vanished a long time ago. It's almost adorable if you think about it. Going to war with a memory and hoping to win. The grave wasn't supposed to be symbolic. They meant it to be final. A burial site for your character, your credibility, your influence, your trajectory. They wanted an irreversible outcome, and they put in the work, didn't they? Digging deeper every time they felt a flicker of insecurity, shoveling faster whenever someone told them to leave you alone, widening the hole whenever they sensed you rising, convinced that if they kept going long enough, eventually you would fall into the very pit they crafted. But here's what they never accounted for: your ability to step aside. You didn't fight them for the ground. You didn't argue for the space they tried to occupy. You let them stand exactly where their ego guided them, and now they're staring at the dirt walls around them, finally realizing they're not watching you fall. They're watching themselves descend. The horror is not in the dirt. It's in the realization that they paved their own downfall under the impression that they were paving yours. That's what has the streets whispering. That's why conversations sound different. That's why tension rises whenever your name appears. Everyone is trying to figure out how the predators became the prey without you lifting a single finger, because the truth is painfully simple. Targeting you was a fatal error. Not because you retaliate viciously, not because you fight with chaos, but because you understand leverage without needing theatrics. People forget how sharp quiet intelligence really is. They think loud reactions indicate dominance. They don't realize that true dominance doesn't need to announce itself. It sits, it waits, it studies, and when the moment arrives, it reveals a blueprint so detailed that the opposition collapses under the weight of their own misjudgments. They dug a grave because they assumed you were predictable, programmable, limitable, someone whose behavior they could anticipate with minimal thought. They didn't understand that your mind is not built for linear traps. They didn't understand that your instincts do not move in straight lines. They didn't understand that you don't walk into pits. You evaluate them. You don't react to attacks. You document them. You don't chase threats. You let them orbit until they self-destruct. What they did understand, too late, is that you're not the one who panics. You're the one who watches their panic grow like a signal rising on a radar. You saw it the moment their plans began to wobble, the moment their bravado started cracking, the moment their arrogance shifted into uncertainty. They still performed confidence on the outside, of course. But confidence without direction is just performance. And the grave they dug became the stage for their final act. People don't talk about how satisfying it is to watch someone realize they miscalculated everything, not out of malice, but out of clarity, out of witnessing the consequences of underestimating someone whose awareness functions like a warning system. It's the kind of clarity that jolts entire environments. You can feel the shift in the air when people go from mocking you to studying you. You can sense the recalibration when they realize their assumptions were the real threat, not you. You can hear the tension in their voices when they ask indirect questions, attempting to understand how you escaped a trap without ever stepping near it. The grave symbolizes their entire strategy. Poorly measured, poorly executed, poorly aligned with reality. They thought having numbers meant having advantage. They thought having followers meant having control. But your strength was never in noise or numbers. It was in accuracy, precision, intuition, reading patterns they didn't know they were broadcasting, interpreting movements they didn't know they were making, anticipating outcomes they didn't believe you were capable of predicting. They didn't check the coordinates, didn't verify the target, didn't cross-examine the narrative. They built a plan around their own hallucinations. And when people build based on illusions, the collapse becomes inevitable. Not as a destiny, but as a mathematical certainty. That's why everyone's doing the math now. That's why they're analyzing every misstep. That's why they're revisiting old conversations, trying to find the moment they veered off the correct path. But there wasn't just one moment. It was a chain. Tiny errors, tiny ego boosts, tiny oversights that compounded until the grave became unavoidable. It's comedic in the darkest way. A group of people so determined to bury someone that they forgot to look where they were standing. They lost track of the plot, lost track of their position, lost track of who was leading and who was following. And by the time they looked up, the ground beneath them had already shifted. Your restraint played a bigger role than they realize. They expected retaliation. They expected impulsive reactions. They expected you to walk exactly where they wanted you to walk. But restraint is its own brand of warfare. It gives people the illusion of victory. It convinces them they're winning. It feeds their confidence while removing their caution. You let them believe they were succeeding because belief was the rope they needed to hang their entire plan. And now the spectators, the friends, the associates, the witnesses, the background observers, they're adjusting their perception. Not because you changed anything, but because the evidence became too loud to ignore. People love a good downfall, but they love an unexpected reversal even more. And nothing reverses harder than a trap collapsing on its architects. Your name carries a different weight now. Not because you're intimidating, but because you embody unpredictability. They tried to end you, but they ended their credibility. They tried to bury you, but they buried their alliances. They tried to target you, but they targeted their own standing. That's the fatal error, not the attempt. Everyone gets targeted at some point. The error was assuming you couldn't respond without responding, assuming you couldn't rise without pushing, assuming you couldn't win without fighting. You didn't need to retaliate. You didn't need to interfere. You didn't need to expose them. You just needed to move accurately while they moved emotionally. Accuracy always wins. Emotion always digs holes. And they dug theirs with pride, with certainty, with misguided superiority. Everyone's watching now. Not with curiosity, but with caution. They're studying the aftermath. They're reviewing the sequence. They're comparing notes to understand how the underdog became the one standing above the crater. And the answer is simple. You didn't fall into their trap because you were never standing on their map. The grave is symbolic of every assumption they made, every weakness they projected onto you, every narrative they forced themselves to believe. And now that they're standing in it, knee-deep in the consequences of their own ambition, the only question left buzzing in their heads is, how did we misread everything? The answer unfolds naturally. They misread everything because they measured you by their limitations, not your capacity. But what they're experiencing now isn't confusion. It's a psychological earthquake, the kind that doesn't shake buildings. It shakes identities. Because there's something terrifying about realizing the helpless one didn't just survive. They were never in danger. That the person they thought they could corner wasn't even participating in the confrontation. That the victim they planned to trap walked right past them while they were still drawing diagrams. That realization hits harder than any retaliation could. It's not your strength that scares them. It's their incompetence. Their entire operation depended on the assumption that you were predictable. They built their confidence on rehearsed conclusions. They followed each other's opinions like a breadcrumb trail to nowhere. They took their own fantasies as factual evidence, and now they're reviewing those blueprints like detectives at a crime scene, realizing the fingerprints all belong to the investigators, not the suspect. That's why everyone is doing the math now, because the miscalculation wasn't small. It was catastrophic. It wasn't one wrong digit. It was the entire equation written upside down. See, they thought digging a grave was a linear process. Find soil, start digging, throw the dirt, prepare the site. Simple. But their simplicity was the trap. They didn't realize graves have a unique nature. They don't care who the intended occupant is. They only care about who falls in first. And while they were so busy sculpting your downfall, they forgot one basic principle. Holes don't discriminate. The ground doesn't care about intent. If you stand too close, gravity will handle the rest. And gravity handled them with precision. What's particularly entertaining is how confidently they moved. They weren't hesitant. They weren't discreet. They didn't check coordinates. They didn't verify terrain. They didn't confirm their target's trajectory. They were so eager to bury you that they practically sprinted into the very pit they created. And the moment the realization hit that the architectural masterpiece they designed is now their living space, you could feel the shift in the air. You could sense the tension. You could almost hear the soft, stunned internal whisper. Wait, how did we end up down here? That's the dark comedy of it all. They weren't pushed. They weren't tricked. They weren't lured. They simply walked into it because arrogance told them the ground was solid, because ego told them you were stationary, because delusion told them graves only go one way. And now they're standing in the dirt, trying to pretend it's part of an unrelated situation. They want to believe the pit appeared out of nowhere. They want to rewrite the sequence. They want to erase their footprints from the edge. But everyone around them sees the truth. They dug the hole. They climbed in. And then they tried to accuse the dirt of betrayal. People are whispering different now because the spectacle is undeniable. Watching you rise wasn't the surprise. Watching them plummet was. People assumed you'd survive. They didn't expect the architects of your downfall to become the casualties of their own blueprint. The collapse wasn't loud. It was embarrassing. A slow slide rather than a dramatic fall. A realization creeping in like an unwelcome guest. We did this to ourselves. And that sting burns deeper than any blow you could have delivered. You didn't swing. You didn't strike. You didn't sabotage. You simply stepped aside and let their momentum finish the job. And momentum fueled by arrogance has no brakes. That's what has them trembling now. Not you. Your restraint. Your refusal to panic. Your refusal to react. Your refusal to join their chaos. They expected war and got observation. They prepared for confrontation and got indifference. They anticipated counterattacks and got patience. Nothing unsettles a self-declared enemy faster than realizing you don't see them as one. Now the entire environment feels it. That unease, that tension, that temperature shift when someone who plotted against you realizes their plan wasn't just flawed, it was suicidal. Because the moment they look at you now, they're not seeing a target. They're seeing a mirror reflecting their miscalculations back at them. And that reflection is humiliating. It forces them to acknowledge everything they avoided confronting. Their pettiness, their impulsiveness, their fantasy of superiority, their desire to control what they couldn't comprehend. This is where the psychological chaos begins. Because when a person stands in a grave they dug, their first instinct isn't to climb out. It's to deny the hole exists. They start blaming distractions, blaming circumstances, blaming each other. They reenact the sequence in their minds and try to pinpoint the exact moment things went wrong, unaware that the moment was the first shovel of dirt. The minute they decided to target you, the outcome was sealed. Not by mystique, not by destiny, but by math. Simple, unforgiving math. You cannot defeat someone you mismeasure. You cannot trap someone you don't understand. You cannot bury someone who is not positioned where you imagine them to be. Every move they made was guided by emotion. Every counter move you made was guided by clarity. They acted based on fantasy. You responded based on observation. That's why they're stuck. That's why they're studying the ground beneath them, like it's going to provide answers. That's why everyone is calculating the same equation. How far off were we? And the answer is, catastrophically. They assumed the grave would bring closure. Instead, it exposed their entire mindset. The digging wasn't preparation. It was confession. Every shovelful was an admission of insecurity. Every whispered plan was an admission of inadequacy. Every attempt to corner you was an admission they feared your growth. They weren't trying to bury you. They were trying to bury the possibility of being overshadowed by you. But fear-driven construction always collapses. They didn't check the coordinates because they didn't want truth. They wanted confirmation bias. They didn't want accuracy. They wanted validation. And validation is the most unreliable compass in existence. It points wherever ego wants it to point, regardless of the terrain. Now the terrain has swallowed them, And the funniest part is how politely you stepped back to let it happen. They expected you to resist, expected you to panic, expected you to plead. But you didn't treat their attack like a threat. You treated it like weather, something that passes on its own as long as you move correctly. That non-reaction was your real counterattack. Not loud, not theatrical, just effective. And now, as they stand in the grave, trying to look composed through the humiliation, you can see the cracks forming in real time. The forced calm, the stiff posture, the sudden politeness, the revised narratives, the desperate attempts to look like they're fine. They're not. They're drowning in the realization that they aimed at someone with a higher vantage point than they anticipated. They swung upward, lost balance, and toppled forward, straight into the pit. This is the stage where their psychology stops being subtle and starts being theatrical. You can almost map their phases like a behavioral chart. First denial, then confusion, then deflection, then panic, then the final stage, realizing they can't climb out without acknowledging the hole exists. And that's the one thing they hate more than the fall itself. Admitting the fall wasn't an accident, that it wasn't caused by anyone but themselves, that their hands are covered in the same dirt they're now stuck in. They're trying so hard to regain control of the narrative. You can see it in their posture. You can feel it in the way they avoid eye contact. You can sense it in how carefully they speak now. Every word they choose is weighed, measured, filtered. They think playing calm gives the illusion of stability. But stability doesn't need performance. Only panic does. And their panic is showing. They're calculating, but the math is broken. They're reviewing, but the data is corrupted. They're holding conferences in their heads, trying to understand how the harmless one became the tipping point that shattered their entire strategy. The dark humor here is that the grave wasn't even set well. It wasn't cleverly executed. It wasn't a masterpiece. It was sloppy, rushed, impulsive work built on wishful thinking. And yet they were so confident in it, so proud, so sure you'd fall for it, so sure they were steps ahead. Standing in the dirt now, they finally realized they were steps behind the entire time. Every environment has a moment where the atmosphere changes, where people stop pretending they didn't notice the collapse. You can feel that shift now. Everyone around them is reevaluating everything they once believed. People who once sided with them quietly distance themselves. People who once ignored you now tilt their heads in curiosity. People who once doubted you suddenly start speaking your name with consideration. Not admiration yet, but caution. Respect's precursor. Because this isn't just a downfall. They're witnessing a reversal they didn't think was possible. Not because you performed a stunt. Not because you exposed anything. But because consequences came knocking without you having to lift the knocker. What they tried to bury rose higher than the ground they fell into. And do you know what unsettles them most? It's not that they miscalculated. It's not that their plan failed. It's not even that people are starting to see them differently. It's the realization that you saw everything. Not just the grave, not just the digging. You saw their motivations, their impulses, their insecurities, their projections, their jealousy masquerading as leadership, their pettiness disguised as strategic concern. You saw right through them and chose not to confront them because confrontation would have given them validation. You gave them nothing. Not your reaction, not your fear, not your participation. And nothing humiliates someone more than realizing the person they tried to destroy wasn't even emotionally involved enough to respond. Now they're trapped in a double bind. Stay in the grave and accept the humiliation. climb out of the grave and expose the climb. Either way, they lose. They want to pretend they're analyzing the whole, not trapped in it. They want to frame this as a temporary setback, something that just happened, as if dirt jumps up and surrounds people randomly. But the observers see through that performance instantly. Observers are not fools. They know when someone is standing in a pit of their own making, and they talk, they whisper, they calculate, they connect dots. Every onlooker is doing the math now, and the numbers consistently point to the same outcome. Targeting you was the fatal error. Not a poor choice, not a mistake, a fatal error. A miscalculation so severe it cost them their footing, their credibility, their mask, and their position. Fatal errors are interesting, not because they're loud, but because they carry consequences that cannot be reversed. A trap can be reset, a plan can be revised, but a fatal error leaves an imprint on reputations, and reputations rarely regenerate. Now they're trying to assess how much damage control is possible. They make subtle changes. Tone softens, shoulders lower, voices slow, phrases become gentler. They think these small adjustments hide the fracture. They don't. They're transparent. Transparent like trying to sweep dirt while still standing knee-deep in it. They're also trying to rewrite the past, reframing their hostility as concern, reframing their sabotage as misunderstanding, reframing their mockery as miscommunication. But rewriting doesn't work when everyone saw the original script unfold live. People remember the tone. People remember the posture. People remember who carried the shovel and who stood on the sidelines. This is where their panic becomes organized. Not outward panic, internal panic, the kind that shows up in glances, hesitations, and that tiny pause before answering anything involving your name. Because now, your name isn't a trigger for their confidence. It's a trigger for their regret. Not loud regret, quiet regret. Regret that echoes in the mind late at night, questioning the wisdom of digging holes in the first place. It's dawning on them that the grave was never a strategy. It was a confession disguised as preparation. Every shovelful wasn't an attack on you. It was a reflection of their fear about you, their desperation to contain something they couldn't measure, their hunger to control what wasn't theirs to control, their urge to bury what made them uncomfortable. They didn't dig to end you. They dug because they couldn't handle the idea of you continuing. That's why they're so shaken now. Because not only are you still here, you're standing on ground far more stable than theirs. Not because you pushed them, but because they walked backward into a hole while trying to intimidate you. That's the kind of irony that stings for years, and the environment feels different now. It's not the same space it was before they dug anything. People navigate differently. People speak differently. People look at you differently. They're not analyzing you. They're analyzing themselves in relation to you. Because when someone walks into a grave they dug for someone else, every witness stops and reevaluates where they stand. Some of them fear being next to dig. Some of them fear being associated with the diggers. Some of them fear being caught observing. And some of them, very quietly, fear ever underestimating you again. Now the air around them carries a pressure they can't name. The ground beneath them feels like a reminder. The memory of the dug grave sticks to them like dust they can't wipe off. Every time they try to reassert confidence, the image flashes back, them standing proudly with the shovel, unaware of the GPS failure. That humiliation becomes a permanent watermark across their psyche. And the dark humor? They still think no one noticed. They still believe their little performance is working. They're convinced that if they stand still long enough, people will forget there in a pit. But that's not how this works. You can't pretend your way out of a hole you dug. You can't posture your way back to level ground. You can't rebrand a collapse. And you definitely can't bury someone who learned to read maps while you refused to check coordinates. This is why the environment isn't laughing. They're calculating. They're realizing that if someone like you could avoid a collective trap effortlessly, then maybe you're not just resilient. Maybe you're someone whose perception outmatches the strategies thrown at you. Maybe the real threat wasn't their plan. It was your awareness. And now that awareness is unmistakable, unavoidable, unedited. The grave they dug is no longer a threat. It's evidence. And the deeper their regret sinks, the deeper the realization hits. You didn't outsmart them. You simply didn't join them. And that truth terrifies them on a level they didn't prepare for. Because there's a different kind of psychological damage that happens when people realize their enemy wasn't even trying. They thought they were engaged in a game, a rivalry, a campaign. They imagined themselves as masterminds navigating complexity. They envisioned themselves as strategists organizing an attack. Meanwhile, you weren't even on the battlefield. You weren't countering. You weren't defending. You weren't retaliating. You were simply observing from a vantage point they didn't know existed. And when someone realizes they weren't beaten by resistance, they were beaten by their own momentum, it hits differently. It hits like a mirror they can't avoid. Now the ground beneath them feels like proof. Every grain of dirt touching their shoes reminds them of the miscalculation. They feel it when they walk. They feel it when they talk. They feel it every time your name enters the conversation. They feel the weight of the grave, not physically, but psychologically, like a timestamp marking the moment everything they assumed about you collapsed. And now they're stuck in a loop, trying to understand how the person they dismissed so confidently ended up miles ahead while they ended up in a hole. That's the kind of realization that rearranges hierarchies, the kind that forces people to reevaluate themselves, the kind that makes observers shift their loyalty, adjust their posture, rethink their assumptions. Because when a trap flips on its creators, everyone learns something. Intent doesn't equal accuracy, and confidence doesn't equal intelligence, and loudness doesn't equal leadership. And digging a grave doesn't make you an undertaker. It just makes you someone holding a shovel. The irony keeps growing, because the more they try to escape the humiliation, the deeper they sink into it. Their attempts to distance themselves from the collapse expose them even more. They avoid your presence now, not because they fear confrontation, but because they fear reflection. Looking at you forces them to confront the truth. They didn't lose a battle. They lost their own narrative. Their identity depended on believing they controlled the situation. That belief was their guide, their internal GPS, and that GPS was broken from the beginning. And the funniest part? They never checked for updates. They navigated using outdated assumptions. They routed their strategies around misread versions of you. They followed coordinates based on rumor, projection, insecurity, envy. They trusted their internal compass more than the external reality. And now, standing knee-deep in the grave, their biggest fear isn't being stuck. It's being seen stuck. They know everyone's observing. They know calculations are being made. They know the narrative has shifted. They know the spotlight is no longer flattering. It's exposing. They thought digging a grave gave them control over your trajectory. Instead, it revealed theirs. They believed creating a downfall for someone else automatically elevated them. Instead, it revealed how low their standards actually were. They believed targeting you would send a message. It did. the opposite one. Because the only message people see now is this: if you try to bury someone who was never beneath you, you end up burying yourself. Their faces reveal everything: the tight jaw, the strained posture, the forced calm, the awkward smiles, the quiet tone, the sudden humility. These aren't traits of confidence. They're symptoms of collapse. They're symptoms of people trying to maintain dignity inside a situation that stripped it away. They're symptoms of individuals realizing their plan didn't just fail, it inverted. Your name has become a reminder of that inversion. And as the days pass, the grave doesn't shrink. It grows in significance. It becomes the metaphor people bring up in private conversations. It becomes the cautionary tale whispered behind closed doors. It becomes the example used to warn others about miscalculating their targets. People who once underestimated you are now studying you, not to attack, but to understand. Because they've finally learned that you're not reactive, you're predictive. You don't rush, you don't panic, you don't operate on impulse. You move when necessary and remain still when unnecessary. That stillness is what made their collapse so seamless. Now comes the phase they feared most: accountability by environment. Not forced accountability, organic accountability. The kind that breeds itself without effort. People are asking questions, not loudly, quietly, strategically. Questions like, how did they miss the signs? And why were they so confident? And how did they misread someone so thoroughly? The environment has shifted into analyst mode. And analysts don't rely on fantasy. They rely on patterns. And the pattern is clear. They dug the grave. They didn't check the GPS. They walked into it. And you kept walking forward. This is the moment where people start seeing you through a different lens. Not as someone who survived sabotage, but as someone who transcended it. Not as someone who won a conflict, but as someone who invalidated the conflict before it even began. People realize you didn't override the trap. You rendered it irrelevant. You didn't avoid danger. You stood so far outside it that danger never reached your coordinates. That kind of awareness creates a ripple effect, a shift in hierarchy, a recalibration of how people measure you. And that recalibration creates fear. Not fear of you harming them, fear of them misjudging you, fear of repeating the same mistake that buried the first group. Fear of digging any hole without checking the GPS twice, 3 times, 10 times. Fear of even positioning themselves near conflict involving you, because they've learned how that story ends. Not with your downfall, but with someone else falling backward into their own excavation. And this fear does something powerful. It cleans the environment. It filters out reckless behavior. It forces people to think before they act. You didn't demand respect. You created conditions where disrespect destroys itself. You didn't chase validation. You existed so accurately that invalidation became a hazard for the invalidators. But the ones still standing in the grave feel the shift more intensely. They're suffocating in self-awareness. They're drowning in analysis. They can't escape the math because the math doesn't lie. The conclusion is everywhere they look, they targeted you, and that decision is now the anchor tied to their reputation. They know the environment sees it. They know they can't salvage the narrative. They know the grave is part of their identity now, and the psychological gravity of that realization pulls them downward. Their confidence falters, their certainty crumbles, their internal monologues turn hostile, not toward you, toward themselves. They replay the moment they picked up the shovel. They replay the moment they spoke your name with arrogance. They replay the moment they assumed they understood you. They relive each decision as a regret, each assumption as a failure, each action as a stepping stone into the pit. People talk about downfall like it's an event. It's not. It's a process, slow, revealing, unforgiving. And they're in the middle of that process right now, each day sinking a little deeper into the consequences they built with their own hands. The grave hasn't closed on them physically, but psychologically. They're already under the dirt. That's why their faces look different, why their tone shifted, why their posture deflated, why their confidence evaporated. Because they finally understand the truth. You were not the one being hunted. You were the one watching the hunters lose their direction. The coordinates were wrong. Their assumptions were wrong. Their timing was wrong. Their target was wrong. Everything was wrong, except the hole they dug. That part was accurate, well constructed even. They just didn't anticipate being the ones standing inside it. And now the environment uses them as the example of what happens when arrogance replaces intelligence, when assumptions replace strategy, when ego replaces accuracy, when someone thinks drawing a map means they control the territory. This is the part they didn't expect. You never needed revenge. You never needed retaliation. You never needed to bury them. All you needed was truth. And truth did the burying for you. Truth always does. Because truth doesn't shout, doesn't push, doesn't fight. Truth stands still and lets lies fall under their own weight. This is why people treat you differently now. With deliberation, with calculation, with respect disguised as caution. Not because they fear what you might do, but because they fear making the same mistake someone else made. You didn't just redefine your role in the environment. You redefined how the environment behaves around you. And the grave? It remains where it is, a monument, a warning, a reminder. A reminder that they didn't lose because you fought back. They lost because they fought someone who wasn't even standing on the same battlefield. They didn't collapse because you pushed them. They collapsed because they stood too close to the hole they dug. Everyone sees it now. Everyone understands it now. Everyone calculates before approaching you now. Because the story is written, the evidence is visible, and the conclusion is final. They dug a grave. They didn't check the GPS, now they're standing in it. And targeting you was the fatal error that put them there.